China raising the possibility of an air defense zone at the security summit. Clearly, Beijing has no plans to stop its reclamation efforts in the South China Sea, even though you have the U.S. and other nations demanding that China stop.
That's right, Tamara. Absolutely no breakthrough at all for anyone who's expecting one here. No meeting of minds between not only the US and China, but China and pretty much the rest of the delegations here. This is one of the very few times on the international calendar where key players in the Asia-Pacific defence circles can get together and talk about things and try and reach some sort of strategic way forward. But obviously very little sign of that down here in Singapore this weekend, Amra. At the centre of all this and making the headlines and dominating the discussions, of course, is China's aggressive expansion in the East and South China Seas. The US says that they've reclaimed something like 2,000 acres in 7 different locations in the East and South China Seas. They're calling it the Great Wall of Sand, which China has taken sort of pretty umbrage with. But certainly the US is stepping up not only its rhetoric, but also its actions in the area. Listen to what the Defence Secretary, Ash Carter, had to say about the US position.
The United States will fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows, as U.S. forces do all over the world. America, alongside its allies and partners in the regional architecture, will not be deterred from exercising these rights, the rights of all nations. After all, turning an underwater rock into an airfield simply does not afford the rights of sovereignty or permit restrictions on international air or maritime transit.
It's that rights of sovereignty which are at the heart of this issue. Amber, what claims does China actually have? What legitimate claims does China have to claim this vast area of the South and East China Seas? Now, the Chinese were also here. Interestingly, we had the Defence Secretary of the US. Chinese only saw fit to send the Deputy Chief of Staff of the PLA, the Chinese military, the People's Liberation Army. He pretty much read from a prepared script. Listen to what he had to say.
Regarding the issue of air defense zone in the South China Sea, it will depend on whether our security in the air and maritime will be threatened, and to what extent, and comprehensive factors will be taken into consideration. The situation in the South China Sea has been on the whole peaceful and stable. There is no reason for people to play up this issue in the South China Sea.
Justified and legitimate, the Deputy Chief of Staff called China's actions, but that is very much a minority here. This was a forum which was open to questions, and the Chinese did take questions, but it kept referring back to pretty much the script. One delegate here calling it an in-your-face dismissal of the concerns of the rest of the forum about China's actions. And there's still a lot of opaqueness about actually what China wants to achieve, why it's doing what it's doing. So certainly, Amber, as I said, no closing of this growing gap between the US, which says it's determined to press on with what it says is international law, whatever actions it chooses to take under international law, while the Chinese saying, raising the threat, as you say, this new air exclusion zone, and also firmly saying that it is going to continue to develop these areas of the South and East China Seas.
Yeah, strong and staunch rhetoric on both sides, as we just heard from the sound bites there, Andrew. I'm curious to know where the U.S. and the Chinese relationship stand at this point, because it seems like the tensions just keep ratcheting up, especially in light of that U.S. surveillance flight over the Spratly Islands just a few days ago, and the Chinese saying, leave our territorial waters, and the U.S. essentially ignoring those demands.
Absolutely. I mean, the relations between these two superpowers are never easy, and certainly over recent years have been becoming increasingly strained, not just over this, but over a number of issues, over economic issues as well. One delegate was quoted as saying here that although the speeches were very blunt, the positions were very clear, there wasn't the same sort of tensions that we have seen in previous Shangri-La dialogues between the US and China. So at least that's something to take away from this, although it's completely intransient on both sides about their strategy. As far as overall tensions, yes, they're high. They could go a lot higher. The real fear here, and the underlying all this, Amra, is that there could be a miscalculation, a mistake between two heavily powered sort of people who are chasing different strategic decisions, which could lead to some sort of military conflict. That's the real, some sort of flashpoint which could lead to a military conflict between the US and China. That's the real fear, and certainly nothing here suggested that the tensions are going to be ratcheted down anytime soon.